Hey everyone, I'm Trevor Lohman and this is Longevity Research Review. I want to talk today about a really interesting study. It's about allostatic load, and if you don't know what allostatic load is and you're into longevity, you should definitely do a quick Google search or look up some of these initial papers by Bruce McEwen that introduced the concept of allostatic load. This is a term that McEwen and Steller coined to describe kind of like a cumulative wear and tear on the body that revolves mostly about stress and the effort that goes into maintaining homeostasis. They called that allostasis. So the original study was in the Archives of Internal Medicine, and then 5 years later they did another study in the New England Journal of Medicine. So definitely check those out if you haven't heard of it. What this paper does in a really straightforward way is it identifies the 5 biomarkers most associated with mortality risk in a really large UK birth cohort. And so this is right up my alley in terms of the research that I do and am doing. I've actually cited this paper in my last paper. So I really like what they've done here. So I'm going to just skip down to the method. So they used the 1958 National Child Development Study in Great Britain. If anybody knows how to get that, please let me know. I've looked on the website and I can't quite figure out how to get access to that. But what they did is they defined measures of allostatic load. So it's this idea that you can throw measures together that are correlated with health and with stress, and you can build an index to measure a variety of things. But in this case, they're trying to measure basically cumulative wear and tear that the body takes on in an effort to maintain homeostasis. So they broke it down. They ended up using 14 biomarkers representing 4 different systems. So for the neuroendocrine system, they used cortisol, salivary cortisol. For the immune system, they used IGF-1 and C-reactive protein, fibrinogen, and immunoglobulin E. These are all interesting. That you see these pop up in a lot of different longevity and mortality studies and mortality risk prediction studies. Fibrinogen, especially with its role in heart disease and CRPs, linked inflammation and infection. So these are really interesting markers to look at. For the metabolic system, they used, markers that we've all heard of, HDL and LDL, triglycerides, and really interestingly, hemoglobin A1C. Also, I like that they included some physical measures. It isn't all hematological variables. They also included systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, heart rate, and peak expiratory flow. So what's interesting about this is it has a lot of the core variables that, we've seen since the Framingham study. We have cholesterol in here. We have systolic blood pressure. These are things that have previously been shown to predict heart disease risk. And being that that's the leading cause of death, we would suspect that they would show up as predictors here. I'm foreshadowing a little bit, but that actually wasn't the case. And I have to be careful using the word prediction. They built this model in one data set. As far as I'm aware, they didn't do any external validation. So we're looking at variables that are significantly associated with mortality. So I'm just going to jump all the way down to the first figure. Yes. Okay. So this is figure 2. And so I don't really know who my audience is going to be yet, so let me just describe what this is. So this is a forest plot. The little icons here, the circles and triangles, this represents the hazard ratio. So if you drop down all the way to the bottom, you can see hazard ratio numbers. If something has a hazard ratio of 1, it has no effect on mortality. If something has a hazard ratio of 1.01, that means for every 1 unit increase in a variable, there's a 1% increase in mortality risk. So the higher this number, the more associated, or the more impact a variable is going to have on mortality risk. So when we see these little icons way out to the right of this number 1, we say, oh wow, that's interesting. That has a strong impact on mortality. We don't know if it's significant or not unless we see that this bar here, this represents a 95% confidence interval. If this bar intersects the hazard ratio of 1, that means it contains 1 within the 95% confidence interval. So it would not be statistically significant, just to cut to the chase. So we want to see an icon, that's on either side of this black line. If it's on the left, it's protective. If it's on the right, it's hazardous, whose 95% confidence interval line does not intersect the 1. And so there's two figures here. One is unadjusted. So this is just, what is the raw association between the variable and mortality? This is adjusted for a variety of things. So we're much more interested in this adjusted model. They even adjust for adverse childhood events and all these different things that we know are covariates, or they're confounding variables, sorry. So what do we see? Well, we see, is there a legend anywhere? Okay, sorry. This is the figure I was looking for. So same conversation. Here we are. What do we see? Well, we see the first one that looks like it's out way away from this hazard ratio of 1 is CRP, C-reactive protein. And this shouldn't come as a huge surprise that inflammation is associated with mortality. And so they're not associating this with age necessarily. They're associating it with mortality, although it could also be associated with age. We don't know that from this study. But we can see clearly that C-reactive protein is significantly associated with mortality. And you can't really tell in this picture, but fibrinogen is as well. It doesn't cross the line. If you were to read in the results section, it is statistically significant. So CRP and fibrinogen, right off the bat, we see those are two significantly associated variables with mortality risk. And then everything else, let's see, IGF-1, immunoglobulin E, no. This is probably a bit shocking right here, HDL. Is not significantly associated with mortality risk, but look how close it is. It is close. We'd have to look up the actual p-value, but I found this in a study that I'm working on right now in the NHANES 2 sample that HDL was a significant covariate until we adjusted for age. Once we adjusted for age, it was just barely not significant. I suspect with more sample, it'd become significant, but anyway. LDL is often not significant, even with a large sample size. It had a hazard ratio of 0 in my analysis in a sample size of 5,000, so it wasn't significant, though. Same with triglycerides, non-significant. Interesting but not surprising, hemoglobin A1C is significantly associated with mortality. So, and then this is kind of shocking if, considering what we know from the Framingham Heart Study and other studies. Systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure were not significantly associated with mortality. A lot of times they'll show up as significantly associated until you adjust for age. So what this paper is doing is saying, okay, we know all these things that are indirectly associated with mortality because they tend to increase with age, but which variables predict or are significantly associated with mortality after being adjusted for age? Which variables are independent predictors or independent covariates? And so it's actually, when we look at the physical measures, heart rate and peak inspiratory flow. So this is pretty interesting to me, at least. CRP, fibrinogen, hemoglobin A1C, high heart rate, and high peak inspiratory flow are all significantly associated with increased mortality risk. So they all have a hazard ratio above 1, and they are all statistically significant. So that's pretty interesting to me. I think I'll leave it there. The purpose of these videos is to just be quick little snippets on interesting research out there. So if you're interested in this, if you want to use it in a paper, if you want to read or learn more about it, the title is, it's a long paper. The title is right here. Super interesting. Follow, these authors, check out their other work. All really, really useful, interesting